basically, it comes down to processing your own lumber. You can buy it in rough and get it as straight and true as you want. The other big thing is it does save about 30 to 50% because you're not paying for the processing.
I just got back from the hardware store. You guys believe how much this stuff costs? It's like gold.
Welcome to this episode on the Warrior Wood Shop. In today's show, we're going to talk about the 6 steps to processing a raw milled saw lumber or sawmilled rough board onto usable lumber. That's what we do every day in class. I'd like to welcome our 2 guest science teachers, Mr. Gentleman, Mr. Freeman. You've seen this guy before, Mr. Mertens. I'm Mr. Ottaway, so we know our experience. So let's see where these guys at. Well, Mr. Gentleman, what would you say yours is?
You know, I'm kind of medium. I've built some stuff. I built a cabinet that we have in our house and things like that.
That was a nice picture. I saw that.
But I've never actually milled my lumber. I started off with the milled lumber at Home Depot, and they got expensive.
I'm pretty novice. I never had a shop class before. I've built some like framing type things and helped out with like decks and fences, but never anything as a
So you guys are at least comfortable with tools. And we didn't want true beginners for this series because the planer, the joiner, the table saw, those aren't true beginner saws. Usually you start out like Mr. Gentleman did, buying some raw mill or Home Depot center lumber. You realize, I'm ready to upgrade. So let's move on to step number 1, which is taking a longboard and getting it more manageable into shorter pieces. All right, since you both have helped us out with the joiner and the planer, how much of a challenge is it going to be handling an 8 to 12 foot board on each of those machines?
It'd be a little awkward.
Be a little awkward. So one of our first steps is what we call rough cutting. We're going to add about 2 to 3 inches, so it takes care of that snipe potential. And these ends aren't square, and neither are the edge, so we don't want to rely yet totally on a final finish measurement. So looks like you're on the invisible rough cut line there, so we'll go ahead and make the cut. Alright, we can definitely tell we got a beginner here. One of our shop rules is we leave the saw down until it comes to a complete stop. It's not as dangerous with a larger board, but with the smaller cutoffs, which is going to be one of our steps later, that small piece could be potential projectile. So remember that in one of the upcoming steps. In our shop, we're going to use the planer as a second step because we do order it what's called hit and miss planer. Still have some rough surfaces, but it's relatively flat. Check out our joiner video if you got a twist or a warp on how to face joiner. But again, that's more an advanced technique, and we try to order lumber that doesn't need that. So step number 2 is to planer the board to the desired thickness. And if you have multiple boards in your project, chances are they all need to be the same thickness. Quick quiz review, how do you get them all the same thickness?
Just run them through one after the other at the same height with the planer there.
And no matter what the thickness is, if they're all run through, they'll be exactly the same. Quit sitting in the back of the room. You're not going to get all these questions. All right, so now we've taken care of it. You did a real good job of taking care of the top and bottom. We're getting closer and closer to that home center lumber here. Our next step is to take care of these rough edges. And we're going to do that over here at the joiner. All right, so we've got our 1 edge straight. Again, that was done at the joiner. Back of the room guy. Why didn't we joiner the other edge?
Because you're just going to end up with like 2 uneven edges. All it can do is straighten out an edge. It can't make them parallel.
The joiner straightens, and then the table saw parallel cut. So good answer. You got that set to 7.5. The board's about 8 inches wide, so we're going to cut 1/4 to 1/2 inch off, or whatever our project calls for. But you might as well maximize your lumber. Okay, on our saw, you got to make sure the green light's on, and you pull out the red handle. Left hand up here. Yep.
we need 26 inches for our project. Now it's time to cut it to length, right?
Well, since we've modified 4 of the 6 edges of this board, are we guaranteed that this is 90 degrees anymore?
No.
No. So what our step number 5 in our 6-step process is what we call squaring up the end of the board. And that is just simply cutting off maybe 1/4 of an inch, a little more if there's a defect on the end of the board, a split, a knot. Then from there we can measure it to length. Hey guys, which end did you cut off?
I don't know.
Didn't you mark it first?
No.
You're the one that cut it.
I guess I should have marked it.
So what we found in our class is this might be 2 or 3 class periods before you're doing the final length step. So it's a good practice just to put a simple initials, your mark, something like that, because you can tell what you were actually going to do is unfortunately a common mistake in our class. Mr. Freeman squared up this end. You were hooking the tape measure on the end that was not square, and you would have still ended up with the end square edge. So tips and tricks from the Warrior Woodshop. The yes and no comes into play where don't cut boards to length until you're ready to actually use them. Because later on in the project, we're going to be using the table saws, the routers, and other tools to cut grooves and notches. And just because the plan says they're 3/8 deep, you've got to match the blade height to 3/8 deep. And if it's not, and you've already cut that to length, we're stuck.
Yeah.
We can at least adjust it that way.
Shop can't afford a board stretcher?
Well, the science department could use, no. So let's flip it around. Mr. Freeman said this board is supposed to be 26 inches. Let's go ahead and mark it out. Okay, and let's head back to the miter saw for our final cut. All right, most projects don't require one board. 2 legs, 4 legs, 2 shelves. So one of the things we can do in our class is we've done what's called a stop block, and that's very simplistic of a board clamped to the fence. Imagine having to sit there and measure out 4 times. It's not too bad, but think about the accuracy rating.
I've done that with my miter saw, and it's always a little different.
The other things you want to keep in mind when you're using a stop block is make sure there's no sawdust trapped up in here that will affect it, or slam it up against there and knocking it out of place. So we always say don't use a quick grip on that because quick grips aren't as strong. Use one of the C-clamps. So the final step in processing the board is cut it to final length. He catches on.
I only have to be told 3 or 4 times.
Well, then you'll have to scrap on the saw.
My scrap went down inside the saw. So.
Yeah. Well, let's grab our Home Depot board. This is what Home Depot sells as a 1x6. We made the equivalent to a 1x8. And I'd say this is a little flatter, a little truer. So those are the 6 steps to processing a board. Then if it was a real project from here on out, you'd be cutting your grooves, drilling your holes. And even what you can do at the advanced level is with careful time and attention, you can get perfect edges and make tabletops. We do have another video that covers how to do this in depth, but this was just planering and joinering, all the steps we talked about. Well, I want to thank you guys for helping us out on this video. You guys got any final questions or?
Not that I can think of.
No, I'm hoping I get to come and observe that next video.
Our series had covered 2 different tools and the processing. So check our other videos out if you want to learn how to use the planer more in depth or the joiner more in depth. These 6 steps are every board of every project if you're starting with raw milled lumber. If you're starting with home center lumber, you're probably starting off about step 4, squaring it up and cutting it to length. So depending on your budget and the tools available, that's where you start. So appreciate your guys' time. Again, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell thingy, check out our other videos on these tools and other tools in the shop. Plus, we're going to have projects. Thanks for watching. Go make some sawdust.